Rabbi say this evening is the fifth night of Chanukah, as it's called, and most frequently the fifth lichtel of Chanukah. And as everyone possibly knows, this particular night is giving much significance in both the Hasidic world as well as the Litvische world, in that this night is typically designated as the evening of giving out Chanukah geld, perhaps presents to children. The question is really, what is the source of that? Why should the fifth night of Chanukah be given any more significance than any other night of Chanukah? Perhaps, and this is a Hasidic minhag, we know that I think certainly Lubavitch and Skver, the fifth night is given much significance. In the Litvische Olam, I think the Chazon Ish gave his Chanukah geld, the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach gave out Chanukah geld, the Stipler brought down certainly from Chaim Kanievsky, Yavad L'Chaim, that the fifth night is the night that's designated for the distribution of Chanukah geld. And just to understand it a little bit more, I wanted to dwell on that thought for a moment or two, to perhaps take something out of this particular evening and understand perhaps a little better what exactly the fifth lichtel, or the fifth night of Chanukah, is and what its significance is. So obviously in the fifth night of Chanukah we transfer over from the right side of the menorah to the left side of the menorah. We're now in the majority of the days of Chanukah, so perhaps there's some significance given to that. I'm sure there are Kabbalistic reasons as well, won't get into, don't know them, and certainly don't want to delve into those too deeply. The Reb Chaim Kanievsky, however, says from a practical perspective, the fifth night of Chanukah can never fall out on Shabbos, and therefore that was the night designated to give out Chanukah geld. So I wanted to perhaps, elaborate on that point for a moment or two, and understand as to why it is that the fifth night of Chanukah never falls out on Shabbos, with somewhat of a new pshat in this particular inyan. Perhaps it's just the way the calendar works out, which is the more practical answer. It doesn't ever fall out on Shabbos, but I want to understand perhaps why. And with that, I want to go back in time somewhat to understand what, if any, where we see perhaps a source of this important night from the very early sources on Chanukah. And for that, I want to turn to the Rishonim, particularly the Ramban on Parshas Bahaloischa. As everyone knows, Rashi tells us that the Aaron HaKohen had Chalishas Adas when he saw the Nesim bringing their Kabbanas, and for that reason, that's why Nismucha Parshas Bahaloischa, which has the menorah in it, to the Parsha of the Nesim, and that the Baruch Shalom told him, L'chagada Mishalhem, you're going to end up with the Hadlakas Neiris, and that is greater than the Kabbanas that the Nesim brought. The Ramban sort of dwells on that somewhat and says, how exactly is that? How is that greater? Aaron HaKohen had a whole bunch of other services that he did in the Beis HaMikdash. He went Lefnai v'Lefnim. He also had the Ketairos. A whole bunch of services and avodas in the Beis HaMikdash that perhaps were on par with the Karbanos of the Nesiim. And the Ramban wants to say maybe those are Chayvis, these are Nadavis, but in any event, the Ramban ultimately ends that the service that Aaron HaKohen got from his Chalishas Adas was not the service of the menorah in Beis HaMikdash, but rather the menorah's Chashmonoim, the menorah that was L'Dori Doris, which comes even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and that is the Chanukah, the holiday of Chanukah as we know it today, which was established by the Kahanim. The Chashmonim, the Malkabim were all Kahanim, and so they established this new Yontif, and that is in fact what the gift was that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave Aaron HaKohen in return for his Chalishas Adas of not being able to participate in the Nesiim. That works itself out in a very interesting way. The Sfarim HaKadoshim tell us that the Yontif of Purim and Chanukah Keneged Netzach and Hoid. As we know from the various, and again, not getting Kabbalistic at all, but as we know, in the order of the spheres, it's Chesed, Gevurah, Tferes, Netzach, and Hoid. And as we know from the Ashpizin, that order of the Avos and the order of Royim who associate with those midas is Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, and Aaron. So the Yontif of Chanukah, actually, according to that schedule, works out very well, and that Hoid works out to be Keneged Aaron HaKohen. Now, Aaron HaKohen is one of the reasons we have the Yontif of Chanukah, based upon the words of the Ramban, which are based on earlier sources, Medrash Starim, and some other things that the Ramban mentions. And so Aaron is the impetus of the Yontif of Chanukah. So I thought perhaps on a very simplistic level, that if Aaron HaKohen is the source of our Yontif, then the fifth night, which is Keneged Aaron, as we mentioned, works out very well never to fall out on Shabbos. And the reason for that is because every day of Chanukah can fall out on Shabbos except for the fifth night, which would then mean that every single day of Chanukah, when Chanukah falls out on Shabbos, as we all know, we don't light menorah on Shabbos. We'll light menorah before Shabbos. We'll light the next light after Shabbos. But we won't do a hadlaka. And as we know, hadlaka is a mitzvah, although there's many Rishonim who explain it just means the burning of it. But we won't do an actual kindling on that day. However, on the fifth night of Chanukah, we will always light menorah, because the fifth night of Chanukah is Keneged Aron HaKohen, which is Keneged the Midah of Hoid, which is partly the reason that it'll always fall out, I believe, during the week. And that is what this evening is. It's a day designated Keneged Aron HaKohen, which perhaps explains why it's an elaborate celebration. He was the one who got us this Yontif of Chanukah through his chalishas of das, of not being able to participate in the Nesiim. And as we all know, we lane the parsha of the Nesiim throughout Chanukah. We begin with Berchas Kehanim, we conclude on Zayis Chanukah with the laning of the parsha of Menorah and V'yas Kain Aaron, perhaps to give us the bookends that the Kehanim were the impetus of our Yontif of Chanukah. Aron HaKohen particularly was the reason we have the Yontif of Chanukah. Tonight is Keneged Aaron, and so therefore there's a great reason to celebrate. So let's take this message to heart. And the midah of Hoyd, the midah of Aaron, is actually, as everyone knows, to be Oyevis Abrius and Mekarvan LaTorah, and perhaps the Yontif of Chanukah, particularly on the fifth night of Chanukah, we have the ability, and a special ability, Mesugal Digil ability, to be able to be Mekar people to Torah. Let's reach out to perhaps those who are, not as knowledgeable in Chanukah, perhaps less affiliated, and let's bring them in and show them a beautiful light of Chanukah, so we should all be able to be Zoicha Ki Ner Mitzvah V'Torah Ar, as the Maranaim tells us, Rachti Ner L'Mashichi. The Ner of Chanukah actually is the harbinger of the coming of Mashiach. B'mher b'meinu, Amen v'Amen. Freilichen Zisa Lichtige Chanukah.